Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Susie. I am your host. I am an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner, and I like to use the podcast as an opportunity to go into some topics a little bit deeper, to give you some insight into different topics that often come up in the Akashic Records, and also just to have an open dialogue about spirituality in general. In my membership at the moment, we are going through an astral realm series of workshops. We're discussing lots of different things about the astral realm. And one thing came up when we were doing the Q&A portion around the movement of people from the New Age into Christianity. And today I really want to talk about what I feel is going on in this New Age to dogmatic Christianity movement. This is, of course, completely my perspective and my opinion, so only I'll take what resonates. My purpose of sharing this with you is that if you are sat there and you are seeing people who were in the New Age or the spiritual community, and then they have denounced it completely and gone into dogmatic Christianity, that this gives you some food for thought. This is my opinion, my perspective, based on my own reflection and my own discussions with my guides in the Akashic Records. Before I get into the what do I think is going on, why is this happening, I think it is necessary for me to explain a little bit about my own personal background in respect of religion, spirituality, and my own personal spiritual development. We understand in the Akashic Records that we choose our family. And I know that can be a really difficult concept to hear if you have had a particularly difficult family situation, if you've had a particularly difficult childhood, but the soul chooses the family. Now, I may do a separate episode on this so that we can maybe look at why people would choose difficult family situations. But for now, we just have to start with that premise that the soul chooses the family to be born into, and that family that they are being born into, the incarnation family, is not always necessarily soul family, which is a different concept. I raise this because my soul was extremely tactical in respect of the family that it chose to be able to have exposure at a very young age to lots of different belief systems, lots of different practices that have allowed me to be able to take a step back and be very objective when it comes to different systems, different paths, different practices. I was not raised in a dogmatic religion. I do not have any religious trauma, and I think it's important for you to all to understand my background to then understand my perspective. I did go to a Christian church as a child. I was confirmed into that Christian church when I was a teenager, and I had a beautiful experience with the Christian church. I am also very conscious and very aware of the number of people who I work with who have experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse from the Christian church. But my own personal experience with the Christian church was a wonderful experience. I had no negative experience associated with that. I did not go to a Christian church because my family was particularly religious. It was more to do with the fact that it was the 1980s, and one of the ways that parents kept children entertained was sending them off to Sunday school. So for me, going to Sunday school and going to church on a Sunday was an opportunity for me to see my friends, and we had a great time going out and doing various different activities. But it wasn't because my family was particularly religious. My mum, in fact, follows an Eastern path, and she was initiated into that path when she was 21. She has had a dedicated spiritual practice associated with her spiritual path since she was 14. When I was growing up, I was not only exposed to the ideas and concepts of the Christian church through my Sunday school and through my church attendance as a child, I was also exposed to concepts such as reincarnation, the soul. And this was really helpful for me at that impressionable age to be able to hold what seemed to be two contradicting concepts and actually see it from that objective perspective of where is the truth in this. Lots of you will know that the concept of reincarnation was something that was removed from the Christian Bible. But if you look at the more esoteric Christian traditions, it isn't something that is in contradiction to the Christian beliefs. If you look at it from the dogmatic Christian perspective, it's in complete contradiction to the Christian beliefs. I found it very strange as a child that I would go to school, and obviously as small children you talk about things like death, and I found it very strange that there was a belief that once you died, that was it, and you either went up to heaven if you were good and you went down to heaven if you were bad. I found this completely a bizarre concept from a very, very early age. And I was fortunate enough to understand and have exposure to concepts like reincarnation and karma and the soul through my mother's own spiritual tradition and through obviously discussions with her about these different things. Not only did I have these two different influences of going to the Christian church, my mother's Eastern spiritual path, but I was also very close to my Nana. And my Nana was very much more on the esoteric occult side of things. Now, before I go into this any further, please let me define occult. Occult just means hidden. It does not mean anything to do with working with lower vibrational energies, lower astral forces. Occult just means hidden. And my Nana was very interested in accessing different energies, accessing the astral realm, doing things like channeling and automatic writing. So for me, this was great exposure because I would see my mother's tradition and her beliefs and everything that went along with that, the Christian side of things and everything that went along with that. And then my Nana, who very much wanted to dig in deeper and have experience for herself about all of the different energies that were out there. One of the things that my Nana always impressed upon me was the absolute need for that development of the discernment, because of the fact that when you start to open yourself up to different energies and you start to really hone those intuitive abilities, there are going to be energies who are of the light and who want to support your evolution expansion, and there are going to be energies that are not of the light and who are going to want to hinder your evolution and expansion. I hope you can understand why I'm sharing all of this with you, and I hope it's not boring you, but I wanted to really kind of set the scene for how I grew up and what I experienced, because I think in doing that, you're going to be able to then see and hopefully understand my perspective when we get into the topic of this movement from the New Age over to Christianity. Personally, I have always found different religions, different belief systems, different philosophies absolutely fascinating. And that has stayed with me throughout my lifetime. I am very conscious of the fact that we need to really try and look at different opinions and different perspectives and then take it with us and see what resonates. I love to explore different perspectives, and it's interesting because we live in an age where we very much tend to stay in our own little echo chambers. The way that algorithms work on social media, it's actually quite difficult to then try and find information and creators who have a different opinion and perspective to you. So I make a conscious effort to do that. I think it's always good to remain open-minded and really try to look for the esoteric truths behind the dogmatic religion. We have to understand that a lot of religion now is very exoteric. It's very dogmatic. And that doesn't mean it's worthless. It just means we have to understand and remember that the exoteric version of something is an explanation of higher esoteric truths. Esoteric truths are oftentimes lost when there is that process of trying to explain something, trying to put something into words. And a lot of the esoteric teachings that took place in the mystery schools were done so via symbol because of this degradation of the meaning of a term or being able to pass that information over with the limitations that we have in words, with the limitations that we have when we're trying to explain something that is of a higher esoteric nature. And unfortunately, this is what has happened with a lot of the dogmatic beliefs. They have taken information and concepts and then they have tried to make it so that it's understandable to our current level of consciousness. And in that process, we lose something in respect of that information. For example, if you have had a mystical, spiritual experience, when you try to explain that experience to somebody, it loses the experience. You don't lose the experience that you have had in that mystical spiritual experience. But no matter how hard you try, when it comes to verbalizing that experience and telling it to another person, that person may understand it on a conscious level. They may be able to understand part of what it is that you've experienced, but they haven't experienced it themselves. And that's the difference between the exoteric and the esoteric. The esoteric is that experience itself that cannot then be verbalized in its complete form. When you look at good spiritual traditions and practices and paths, the aim behind those spiritual traditions and paths is to help you have your own experiences. They are not telling you it's like this and that's just how it is. They are giving you systems, paths, practices, information for you then to take away and to work upon yourself and to have your own experience. The time that we are currently living in is the time of the embodiment of the Christ consciousness. And this is an internal process. Everybody who is on their spiritual path is going through, regardless of the system, the path, the practice that they use. It's all about the embodiment of the Christ consciousness. And when I talk about the Christ consciousness, I'm talking about an evolutionary stream that we are working with. Now, of course, in Christianity, we have Jesus the Christ. And Jesus the Christ is the human embodiment and the example of someone born of a human who then was able to fully embody the Christ consciousness. The Christ consciousness is a stream, an evolutionary stream that we see throughout all of the world religions, paths and practices. It can just sometimes come in with a different name. If it helps, you can think of the Christ, so Jesus the Christ, more as a title than a name. If you would all find it helpful, I can do another episode on Christ consciousness, but I just want you to understand that our time at this moment is our embodiment of the Christ consciousness. It is not, as I have said before on the podcast, a time of sitting at the feet of a guru. And it is not like earlier periods of human development where you're receiving things from a teacher and that teacher is able to essentially transfer things into you. Teachers are amazing and they can help you learn different paths, different practices. They can provide you with all of these wonderful tools and knowledge. But this time that we are in is this internal work. It's the embodiment of the Christ consciousness. This is relevant to what we're discussing today because sometimes what can happen with people moving from the New Age into dogmatic Christianity is they start to really feel into and connect with this Christ consciousness and mistake it for I need to go back into Christianity, or I need to go into Christianity and I need to go into the dogmatic form. They feel the impulse of the Christ consciousness and they misinterpret it for what it is. So why does this happen? Why do people who maybe are very popular, have been in the New Age or the spiritual community for a very long time, why do they go from their own spiritual journey into dogmatic Christianity? Number one, I think what can happen in some cases is that the individual has experienced being tricked or being manipulated by beings of the lower astral realm, and it has unsettled them, it has unnerved them. There are unfortunately a lot of people within the New Age and the spiritual community who like to say that everything is just love and light and that there are no evolutionary forces at play at this time, but there are. And if you have come across an energy and you're working with that energy and you believe that everything is just love and light and you can open up and you don't need to have any form of understanding or protection or anything like that, and then you find out you've been tricked or you've been manipulated, that would be very unnerving and disarming for somebody. So I think that can be one of the reasons as to why this would happen. Going into dogmatic religion would feel more comfortable. It's going to feel safer for someone who has experienced that. You have to remember that the astral realm is a realm where you are learning your discernment. You are learning the ability to sit with, does this resonate with me? And there are many, many, many different beings within the astral realm. That's actually a topic I'm covering on Sunday this week with my members. But in those categories of different beings that there are trickster beings. Beings in the astral realm are able to change their form. They're able to change how they present. So they can present themselves as being, 10 foot tall, golden, glowing, beautiful being, and also be a being from the lower astral realm. The whole point of the astral realm experience is to go through the training of, is this being of the light of the evolutionary stream or is it not? You will see in lots of different traditions the reference to trickster energies, and that's what I'm referring to here. The second point goes with what I said earlier, and it's this misunderstanding of the impulse and that need to embody the impulse. And embodying the impulse means holding that impulse in your form and operating from that place. The third point is that spiritual development, and especially connecting into higher consciousness, can be extremely dysregulating for the nervous system. You will know by now I am a broken record when it comes to make sure before you do anything that you focus on balancing the root chakra, making sure that your nervous system is regulated, because when you start to open up to higher dimensions, higher vibrations, higher consciousness, If you don't have that good foundation point, if you don't have an embodied point of reference and good strong roots into the earth herself, you are going to really experience dysregulation. There are different paths and practices out there that people will work with, and some of those can be extremely dysregulating just by the very nature of the path and the practice. What can happen is if you are opening up to certain things and you aren't taking care of yourself, you aren't taking care of your physical form, because there is this tendency in certain New Age circles that the physical form is not important. We don't need to worry about the human body. It's all about going up and out. It's all about going into the higher chakras and higher consciousness, and let's just forget about the body. When that approach is taken and you're not paying attention to how the physical form is, how your emotions are, how your thought forms are, and you're just focusing on the higher chakras, this can, of course, create further dysregulation in the nervous system. And there is a thing called spiritual burnout, and this is a very real thing that happens to people. I think sometimes when people take this New Age to Christianity path, what's actually happened is they've experienced spiritual burnout, and their ego, whose realm of operation is the comfort zone, says, hey, look, let's just go back into dogmatic religion. It's far safer. We know where we are with it. Let's do that rather than deal with the dysregulation and take some time out to deal with the spiritual burnout. In those cases, of course, people will essentially just throw in the towel and say, this is too hard. This takes too much time and effort. I find this too difficult. I'll go back into a dogmatic form. This point I want to make is going to sound a little bit harsh. Please understand that I say this with complete love and compassion, and it's just my observation of the human condition, myself also being a human, is that we as humans love a quick fix. Think of when you want to lose weight. It's so tempting and it's so much easier to go and take a pill or a crash diet or an injection or whatever it may be, rather than taking that longer term approach of, okay, I need to look at my lifestyle, I need to look at what I'm consuming. We just like quick fixes as humans. It's part of the human condition. And this is also true in terms of the spiritual development and the spiritual community. Oftentimes people don't want to commit to doing the work. Spiritual development is hard. It requires discipline, it requires practice, it requires consistency. And sometimes what will happen with people is they will start to work with a practice. They will do 7 days, they will do 14 days, they will do 30 days. And because they don't see those immediate results, they will just throw in the towel, maybe go and try a different path or practice, and chop and change between paths and practices rather than staying with one consistently. Oftentimes, what is happening as someone is doing their practice is there are actually lots of energetic adjustments that are taking place to that person's light grid, and that light grid is the reference to the 7 energy layers. But the person who is undertaking that practice is not going to necessarily know that those changes have taken place until much later in their lifetime. And this can be very disheartening. People don't like to hear this, but this is how spiritual development truly is. Oftentimes, your soul goes through its spiritual development throughout many incarnations, and this is not something that we want to hear in this day and age. We want to do a practice for a week and then we want to see those immediate results. Those of you in the membership, I look forward to seeing you on Sunday for our next installment of the Astral Realm series. Everybody else, I will see you next week, and I hope that you have found this episode useful and that it has given you some food for thought and hopefully help you to be able to understand this process and have kindness and compassion for people who have chosen to go down this path.